So we are going to discuss chapters 6 and 7 of the New Economics today, just because those are the next chapters in the book.
Mhm.
And hopefully we're going to get joined by a couple more folks. But even if we don't, maybe we can learn from each other. Even there's only three of us. Only.
Mhm.
I don't know if only is the right word. There are three of us. The thing I like
Well,
about most about chapter 6 is the figure he has about the forces of destruction,
mm,
because
mm,
I've seen it in operation when I was teaching school, and I've seen it in operation when my kid was in school. I once told my kid's teacher, I said, you can do anything you want, but as soon as you start interfering with his natural desire to learn, I'm going to come after you.
And what was the teacher's reaction?
She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I mean, the important thing is that he's learning something, not that he has a better grade than the guy next to him."
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, it's interesting. I feel kind of I didn't get too involved with my kids for growing up in the school because I was always away working, and I now live up the road from where the grandchildren go to school. And I don't think they've been well served.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's. I remember Brendan went to a school that was it's a private school. We're trying to keep him places where small class sizes because he has an attention deficit thing that hasn't interfered with anything he's doing, but because of that, we wanted to keep the class sizes small. And
mm,
this operation, the first 2 years he was there, so first and second grade, they corrected papers and showed the kids what they'd done wrong, but they didn't give letter grades A, B, C, D. And then
mm,
in third grade, he got a paper back and I saw it and it had corrections on it and had a grade, I don't know, B or C or whatever it was. So, so I made an appointment with the teacher and asked the question, what changed in the kids between the second and third grade that makes it important to give them grades? She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, he didn't get grades the last 2 years and he seemed to be learning and everything was going fine. Suddenly he's getting grades. What's that about?" "Oh, well, we got to get him into the real world." And I said, this, if his if nothing inside of him has changed, why change what you're doing to help him learn? He's been
mm,
learning. There's no reason to change it. They didn't
yeah,
they didn't buy it. They think there's a reason. You have to hand out
yeah,
grades. How could you have school without grades?
yeah, yeah.
In
Well,
the
that's
U.
it's interesting because that's the well. If you remember, I shared with you. I missed out on the thinking and talking about education in some of the earlier chapters, and this one comes back to it. In fact, but it it intrigues me. Teach This chapter actually says teachers need those scores to identify whether they've taught well
Yes,
or whether the kids have learnt the things that they need to learn. Um, uh, and the subtlety of this statement that comes in this chapter is that you don't have to turn them into grades.
exactly. I told the teacher that. She said, "Well, grades are feedback." And I said, "Well, let me test that theory. So I'm going to give you a 30 question multiple choice test. You take the test, you give it to me, I run through it, I score it, I put it over in the corner, and I tell you B plus. How's that for feedback?"
Mm, mm,
And she said, "Well, you didn't give me the test back to show me, what was right and what was wrong." I said, "You told me the grade was feedback."
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, mm,
Yes, you need feedback to learn. A grade is some kind of feedback, but it's not useful in helping people learn.
A friend of mine is a senior lecturer at a university. I'll just say in Europe. I don't want to name him, but anyway, he's very into Dr. Deming, and the postgraduate Master of Science students have to mark on a 1 to 5 scale the teaching quality that they received, and there's lots of questions. Excuse me, and anything five is the best, 1 is the lowest. Anything an average score of 3 or less demands action. So it's an artificial target. Anyway, he's just delivered a paper at this international conference where the marking scheme that they look at is governed by this international body. And he gave the conference paper last week and he said, all you're doing is tampering, what Dr. Deming calls tampering. And he said, he put up the data of the past few cohorts, like 8, 9, 10 years worth of data. It's a fairly stable system. And he said, but you're asking us to change things and it's tampering. And he said, I got some aha moments. So I'm looking forward to his feedback. He might be on holiday this week, but it does bug me that if you think of a process in education, the process, if you use verb noun, it's teach students, train students, educate students, whatever you want to call it. Now the output has got, well, there's 2 outputs. There's one is the, if you like, what have the students learned? How comfortable are they with it? Did they enjoy it? You can mark it. It's an exam paper. But also one of the biggest inputs in terms of variation is the incoming ability levels, the knowledge levels of the students. So lots of variation going into a process leads to lots of variation coming out. You don't necessarily streamline anything and hit a high value just from the process. So I would be saying to the academics in this world, and especially this international organization, start focusing on the inputs and working on the inputs, and then even stratify, categorize, and even then tailor the training so that the students learn, and then you'll get your desired output, which is really students that are excelling in their field. But if you ignore the variation coming in, you're backing a loser.
Yeah, it's intriguing that there's very little effort to pay attention to the input side, and yet in every process, the input is what determines the output, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
There's not a recognition of that.
And I was looking at this, you mentioned the forces of disruption picture, figure 10 on page 122. And I made a note about that because I've not shown that to anybody in the past. I'm tempted. But my question is, and open to everybody, how open are executives to this diagram? This is really going to push them out of the comfort zone. And I guess a lot of them would just dismiss it and move on. They're not going to give you the time of day to discuss it. Because it says there, these forces cause humiliation, fear, self-defense, competition. So they're going to say, I don't need that, the waste of time. So I've no experience of it. Alan, you had experience of execs on?
No, never got there.
Right.
What I found with the aerospace executives, and frankly, even the school administration when I was teaching school, is that there's very little recognition of the downside of having people compete against each other. They just don't see the downside. And I remember talking to a gal who was working for I reported to a vice president. I was sort of his the the bird in his ear. I was supposed to help him learn how to move in another direction. And I walked by his secretary one day, and she was clearly distraught, not quite crying, but she was really upset. And I said, Barbara, what's the matter? And she says, I hate this time of the year. I said, I'm still not grasping. You seem very upset. That's unusual. She said, this is admin day of the year. So the secretary's day, if you will. And they hand out an award to the best secretary. And she's devastated because probably not the first time she didn't get the award, doesn't get any acknowledgement, but somebody does.
Yeah.
And and I looked at her and I said, and I'll never forget her answer. I said, well, the only thing I can offer you, Barbara, is they're not doing this intentionally. And she said, it hurts anyway. Wow. What's the point of hurting somebody? I don't get it.
Yeah.
And there's very little, evidently, understanding that you don't need competition. In fact, cooperation will work a lot better. Those kids will learn from each other if you let them.
Yeah. Alan will know we've got Barclays Bank, a big bank over here in the UK. And I remember one time hearing that the assistants in the bank, when you want to ask them to negotiate a loan to buy a car or to negotiate a mortgage to buy a house or whatever, or a business loan, they were paid bonuses to they had their targets to meet every week. So they're all fighting against each other. And if they didn't get it, then the worst performing sales guy, if you will, used to be given a cabbage in front of the whole team. And that's really bad news. But I remember I went in one time and I'd done my research. So I still have my Barclays bank account from being a student. And I looked at other places to get a car loan. I knew what I wanted to buy. Sorry, what I want to borrow. And I went in and said, I want to borrow this amount of money. Don't quote me APR. Don't quote me AER. Just tell me the flat rate because I can do the maths in my head. I want to borrow this amount of money over 2 years. What's the flat rate? And the guy told me, and I said, right, well, thanks very much. Cheerio. And he said, but you can have the money now. I said, why am I going to give you an extra £120 over 2 years when I can get a better deal somewhere else? And strangely, that was with the Bank of Ireland through the Honda dealership. And that's what I did. And I said, it was like following me out of the bank. I said, go away. You're not going to meet your bonus today because I'm not giving you my trade,
Yeah,
you couldn't get it.
I have a friend who was a Deming fan and he moved to another company to take a directorship job. And he called one day and said, I never realized how difficult it is when you're offered a bonus for doing something, not to go after the bonus because waiting to buy whatever you're supposed to buy or whatever you might need to buy. If you wait till the next quarter, you're going to be way better off than if you buy it now. But if you buy it now, you're going to get some kind of bonus for having spent your money in a certain way. And he said, it's really hard to resist doing the wrong thing to get the bonus. He said he didn't understand how hard that was.
Well,
and so
it's interesting how it breaks into management, an organization at all levels. It buggers up the system. You can tell, I remember somebody telling me a story about working as a teller, a cash clerk on a bank front desk. And they were under instructions not to give people with certain limited funds a loan or money and stuff. And the people would turn round and walk across the banking hall, and there was something called access was being handed out, credit-free cards, credit cards. And they would pester these people as they walked out of the bank to sign on for a credit card, where the interest is 27% or something, or 25% at the time. And they could have got 5% if they had got one over the counter. But the bank was quite happy to turn them away from the counter. But they were also happy to give them loans at 27% when they knew they couldn't afford them. I mean, it's just absolutely insane.
Yeah. It's there's a different kind of a look to things as near as I can tell from my college experience and experience later between the Western world and the Eastern world. The Eastern world is much more associated with interactions and interdependencies, it seems. In the West, we think everything's separate, and the competition from separate places is going to increase the likelihood of new ideas and a whole bunch of other stuff that really is anti-cooperation. It doesn't mean to be, but it pushes people toward not cooperating. Why would I share an idea with you? Because you might run off and get a bonus for implementing the idea, and I'll be left behind. So I'm not going to share with you. But if the two of them shared something, they might come up with an idea that was better than either one of them had alone, and they'd both be better off. But there's that mindset is not very Western.
Most of us probably, well, certainly in the UK, if you work for a UK company and if you have a bright idea while you're working for them, that you might even help on a project make significant amount of money, the idea belongs to the company.
Yeah.
And if you do anything with that, I've known people being chased and blackballed effectively because they've done it, created some useful gadget or something and started trying to sell it themselves. And companies have come after them. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I bumped into that when I was working in aerospace. I can't remember the circumstances, but they asked me to sign something, and it said, any idea I come up with that I can run off and get a patent on, the company owns the patent. And I'm thinking, if I came up with this on Saturday, not working for you, what the hell? And they said, no, you got to sign this agreement if you want to work here. And I said, I'm willing to amend that agreement. And I crossed out that and I put in, if I come up with something on company time, then certainly that belongs to the company. If I come up with it on my own time, the company has nothing to do with it. And I wouldn't sign their document. And this went on for maybe 3 weeks or so. And their lawyers got involved. And I ended up being the only guy at the company who didn't sign over my rights. And the others just signed the paper. I'm thinking, well, I don't mind if I'm working on your time and I invent something. Okay, that makes sense. But when I'm working on my own time, you don't get to get involved.
Yeah.
And they clearly they could have said, well, no, you're fired then. That's fine. I'll go somewhere where they're going to treat me fairly.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, it never came up in the conversation. So that tells me they weren't confident. They were on good, firm legal grounds with doing this.
Yeah.
There's also some other things in here that are kind of interesting. He's got the role of the management of people. Victoria, how are you? Good morning. And it's interesting. It turns out to be 14 points, like his other 14 points, but they're a different thing, and they're not about leadership. They're about management. If you're managing people, here are the roles you ought to be engaged in. in order to help them get better and help each other get better.
96.
And I love number 14. The role of a manager is he understands the benefits of cooperation and the losses from competition between people and between groups. And he cites Alfie Kohn with that, saying, go read No Contest by Alfie Kohn for more detailed information.
Yeah. But I think I reckon that I've only ever worked with two what I'd call inspirational leaders. The rest have been managers who conform to the system because their bonuses,
Exactly.
they promote the things they've always done. They will not change. So I'm just like, I'm bad news because I kept challenging. I mean, I sometimes said, somebody once said to me, why did you never join the armed forces? I said, because I'd be a square peg in a round hole. I just push back against authority. I don't just believe what people say. I want to know why. Explain it to me, But the manager of a people, that's why I sent that managers and leaders spot the difference. You need, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, you need both. But to manage people, to get the best out of your team, to know a little bit about the home life, to know a little bit about the family life, to know if there's some issues going on. You don't broadcast it, but you're aware of it. And you've got to nurture people to achieve their best. And if they want to move on, either internally or externally, then that's great news. Don't hold them back. But Jaguar used to hold people back, certainly. If somebody got a promotion to an internal position in the company, the existing manager wouldn't release them to join to get the promotion.
Interesting.
That was in the 1990s.
Wow.
In the 1990s. And that's when Ford owned Jaguar, by the way. 1st of April 1990, Ford officially took ownership of Jaguar. And that's the way they operated,
Yeah, there's so many places that are trapped in that kind of mentality. Welcome, Sheldon.
Hey, nice to join you. Sorry I'm late.
It's all right.
Hi. And hello, Victoria. You're hiding there.
Oh, well spotted.
Yeah,
I just finished watching The Bear, the latest season, and that actually is a pretty good show for the extremes and talk about the management of people and how it affects the team. And it's it hits a lot of notes on there, and it's entertaining also. But the way that the restaurant works is obviously very, very crucial for everybody to work together and can fall apart quickly. So it's interesting how the end conclusion of the whole series basically is you got to treat people right and you got to form a family, right? They go to an extreme there. The people working together were a family. So that was it hit a lot of bells for me.
Is that a US TV series? I don't know the name.
It's on Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's about a restaurant, and the restaurant's in Chicago, Illinois, fictitious, called The Bear.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. I enjoy reading Alfie Kohn's work. I've read several of his books, like The Schools Our Children Deserve and The Case Against Competition. And he talks about things that was intriguing to me. I saw he gave a presentation once, and I was in the audience, and at the end I went up to talk to him because he was talking about the downside, the really negative side of handing out rewards to get certain behaviors out of the kids. And because Brendan had an attention problem, one of the theories they had was if you give a kid like that a really short-term goal and promise him something and have him focus, over time he can develop better and better attention. So I went to Alfie and I said, well, my kid has this attention deficit problem. And so there's this technique. And after I read up on the technique, I found out they didn't have any correlation between doing that and actually having results. But that was a way of handling things, lots of short-term rewards with these kids. And I said, what if there's a kid who has some kind of deficiency and needs help? And Alfie looks at me and says, the kid doesn't have a deficiency. The system that can't accept the variability in students has a deficiency. And my brain went, of course, it's not the kid's problem. The kid can learn. You just have to work with him. There's nothing to it.
Yeah.
And Deming talks about joy in learning and joy in work. And Alfie has a great line in one of his books where he talks about, I can knit a sweater and be proud of what I knitted without ever comparing it to a sweater you knitted.
Yeah.
I don't need any competition to feel proud about what I do. I just need to be able to.
When you've done good work, you know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Tell me, on page 127, when it's looking at, he's got these two sketches of a normal distribution. These people form a system must not be ranked. But why on earth did he choose to use the normal distribution? Because I would have just had just a squiggly line that dropped off at both ends, because I don't know what he's trying to convey there.
Oh, his mental model is that in a system you're always going to have variation, and it will tend to be a normal distribution, although sometimes it's very skewed one way or the other. But what he's poking at is that if the variation you get is within the system, whether it's a skewed distribution or a normal distribution, that variation is inherent in the system. And unless you change something in that system, that variation isn't going away.
Okay. I mean, I get that, but I just thought, I'm just intrigued why he choose the normal distribution. I would have just had just a squiggly line, you know. And I mean, I don't want to get to all the different distributions. That's not the point. But it's just, it sort of intrigued me that, you get that, so if you improve the system, you reduce the variation. That's one of his key messages. So that's
I can read that just as a simple one, sort of like, let's not make it complicated, just use a simple diagram that connects with people quickly. If you put a different distribution in, I guess people will say, well, what happens if it slopes the other way?
Yeah. Could be. Yeah. Good point.
Don Wheeler, in one of his books on variation, talks about the idea that a standard distribution, you can say, I got so many things within 1 sigma of the target, so many within 2, so many within 3. And then he's talking about control charts, and he's saying, so when you're using control charts, you can sort of expect that. But the control charts are useful even if your distribution is skewed one way or the other. And he goes through a rule of thumb for like five different skewed variations, some extremely skewed, and they all bump into the idea that when you move toward the edges, stuff gets weirder. But overall, the rule of thumb is, about half the stuff is here, and about 3/4 of it's here, and about 95% of it's here. And so you don't need to worry about the shape of the distribution when you're collecting the data. It's irrelevant.
I know. I think that picture is on the back of one of his books I've got on the bookshelf just over here. because I've read a lot of his books and his white papers, which are very informative.
Yeah, he's really good at helping people grasp how they can use the ideas that they have heard about to help improve whatever they're doing and distinguish between the special causes and the common causes and take appropriate action.
Yeah. And you mentioned Don Wheeler there, and just the passing. I've also read Forrest Brayfogle III, and he's of the view that all the data's got to follow normal distribution, which is really silly.
Yeah.
And by the way, there is no true normal distribution. The tails do not behave themselves. It gets very lumpy bumpy. That's the end of the statistics.
I can tell you that the tails of a normal distribution get particularly bumpy when that tail is approaching a specification limit. I remember a guy put a chart up and we have to drill like 680 holes in this plate that's about 2 inches thick. And, it's got a requirement on the diameters, this diameter between this value and this value. And he showed, like 10 parts they'd made. So we got 6,000 data points and he showed the distribution and everything looks real smooth. But over on one side, the tails, as it comes down, instead of smoothing out and getting lower, it pops up and stays stable.
Yeah.
Top. And I said, I have a question. He said, what's that? And I said, does there happen to be a specification limit right there near the bottom of this curve? And he said, I don't know. Yeah, there is. Why do you ask? And I said, because that specification limit means the guy made the part the wrong size. They measured it and it turned out to be wrong. So they measured it again and it turned out to be right. So your spec limits are affecting your distribution.
Yep.
It's also interesting too that a lot of the companies and managers give all the attention to that left side of a normal distribution, down there at the very tail end. And then I was thinking too that the only kind of attention the people on the so-called top side, the right-hand side of it, you just throw more work at them until their performance degrades, and now they're back to the middle.
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting management technique.
Yeah, drive everybody to mediocrity.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like the normal distribution as a discussion document. I appreciate there's different distributions, but in lots of businesses you don't get enough data to make the normal distribution complete. You get a skeleton of it, if you like, with a small amount of data. And I liked we were just talking about him.
Don Wheeler.
Don Wheeler said he's got somewhere you can start a statistical analysis with six figures, 6 numbers to start the process or something. It'll be rough, but it's a start, and at least you've got something to play with. But one of the things I've tried to sell amongst my people is that the understanding of the shape and the understanding of the implications of upper limits and lower limits, but with the awareness of you won't have enough data to tell you. What you've got to be aware of is that some of the people are going to be on the left. Well, half of them are going to be on the left-hand side, as they say at school, and half of them are going to be on the right. And the people near the problems that you've got down the bottom end are there because this is a distribution. This is in inverted commas normal. It's average. It's the way things are. And if you haven't got enough data, it's really quite handy to be able to talk about it in those terms.
And what's interesting, if you are trying to make a distinction between common cause and special cause, so you can help people out, when you get somebody at the near the bottom end or off the edge at the bottom edge, that means they're doing something different from what everybody else is doing. So if you go find out what they're doing and how that's different, and if what the others are doing can be trained, you can train this person to improve his behavior. But then also on the top end, if you've got some hangers up, you go find out what they're doing, because
So easy, yeah.
it's different. And if that can be trained, you can train everybody else to do that. It's a huge benefit to look at it without trying to rate and rank them, to figure out how you're going to make everybody better at doing what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it struck me that this set of 14 points,
Yes.
you could replace manager with teacher.
Yes. It's very
All the way
much the
through.
same thing.
Yeah. And it also reminded me of training within industry, TWI.
I don't know that.
What? I don't believe that. TWI was the American technique for training war workers, people in the war factories.
Oh man.
And it was the concept of showing somebody a job, explaining the system to them, showing them again, explaining to them the key points, showing them again, answering any questions that they got, and then say, you do it. And you're there reminding them of what the key points are and things. So it's what's the word? It's a mentored technique, and this gets away entirely from this business of the last person in trains the next person.
Yes.
Where your errors get bigger and bigger.
Yes.
You
can use that.
Toyota based their training on TWI. So,
well, it's not easy for organizations, evidently, to grasp that the training to be the same can't be the last guy that learned the job teaches the next guy. That's just going to create way more variation than you need. But it's hard for them to grasp the fact that people are going to learn at different rates, different things. And when you teach somebody something, they retain part of it, they don't get the rest of it. You need that stability. It's like, for those of us in quality, we have to have measurement tools that are calibrated. And you calibrate them to make sure they're working within a normal range of distribution, and that's stable. But they don't stay calibrated forever. They wander, so you have to go back and check. And no quality guy would ever believe that the guy that was using the micrometer to measure the dimension should give his micrometer to the next guy that takes over the job, and he should use it without any more calibration, and that should get passed downstream. Everybody in quality would say that's crazy. But a lot of those guys in quality think we can do training that way. They haven't recognized that it needs calibration. You need to go back to the main purpose of what you were trying to do and make sure that's being captured in the training.
There's a psychological element as well. The chap who's the foreman welder or the top machinist or something like that, his status depends on being better than other people around him.
Yep.
And he doesn't want to share the secrets that he's developed.
I know.
I've been through a few tiny factories where that becomes a really, really big problem. Sort of like you can't talk to the top machinist, but he's the bloke with the knowledge to help you get it right.
Yeah,
better.
I discovered something like that in industry, and what I was in charge of cause and corrective action. When something goes bad, you help people try to figure out what in the world got in the way and made the mess they're in. And what I discovered in this one is that in every organization, there's a guy that the manager knows can follow the rules close enough that they don't get kicked in the rear end for not following the rules, but it's on the ragged edge of being, if not downright illegal, at least very questionable. And they rely on that guy to help them get things done. And when we were doing the cause analysis, I brought that up and we put it on the cause analysis that said, what happens is everybody's got a guy like that. And so he does that because if his behavior and performance is the same as every other manager's, he's not going to get a bonus. He has to perform better. To perform better, he has to kind of cheat the system and not do what everybody else is doing. And by cheating the system, he gets better results, but he's also running the ragged edge of a huge disaster. And you reward him for that behavior, so everybody engages in that behavior. And we put that right up in front of all the executives, and they took action on some things, but they didn't take any action on that cause.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody challenged it, saying that's not what goes on. They just said, oh, okay.
Yeah, I was in a union environment, and that was kind of going on early on in my position there. And basically what it came down to, though, was it was allowed to happen because we didn't understand the process, right? The company did not he had this secret information about one very important piece of the process, but no one else knew it. So the solution to it wasn't anything really to do with him, but was to step back and actually do some studies and understand the process in full. And then that kind of stranglehold he had on this is my knowledge and not other people's loosened up. And it was crazy because the before, when he was holding on to that, and the after we went through not just his area, related areas, and understood the process, he then became willing to train someone where before he would not. So that really made a big difference.
It's interesting. There's a saying that knowledge is power, but knowledge that you keep has way less power than knowledge that you share.
Mm-hmm.
Also in this chapter, Deming offers the idea of the individuals versus the interactions in a system. And what's clear in his little diagram he has, where he's got A plus B plus C plus D, which are individuals, and then he's got all the different interactions, 2 by, 3 bys, 4 bys, 5 bys. What strikes me when I look at that is the leverage is not on working on A, B, C, and D separately. There's much more opportunity because there are many more interactions, and improving the interactions improves things overall. And it's just a huge lever to work on the interactions as opposed to the individuals separately. And yet everything we've designed is to work on the individuals separately. We give them rewards and punishments based on their individual performance. We ask them to compete with each other over raises, et cetera, et cetera. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean that picture on page 130 resonated because that's just statistical thinking, But here it's about individual people, and I made some notes here, and I said that I've worked with engineers, pharma people, microbiologists, etc. And even in their own field, they don't understand interactions. And that's the way that it's taught over here in the UK, and I've found out in Europe as well. There's an awful lot of bad stuff going on. So then my summary was, or question was, why would executive management understand human interactions? Now we have 8. It used to be called the personnel department. Now it's called human relations, or as it's often known, human remains. But Why, and I think the HR people are leading executives down the wrong road. So, for instance, Dell, EMC, before they were bought over by Dell, they didn't have performance appraisals. But then some bright spark in HR said, we need performance appraisals. So they brought it in. Motorola had the high performance, high potential, a 3x3 grid. And you had to force rank your team into boxes. And I thought, well, this is not good. So, one colleague said, I'm putting my whole team into the top box, and because they're the ones that are going to get promotion. And I thought, why is your team better than my team? Because we're all, as individuals, we're all different, and the purpose of a manager is to manage his people so that they excel. And it's not and it's not trade-off. It's combining these people skills for the benefit of all. And I think that's what that diagram's trying to promote. You've got to think about these two-way, three-way, four-way interactions and how do people react. Now, the industrial psychologists and what have you, they can maybe help us, but don't do the ranking of people, understand their differences and understand how to help them to improve their own, their individual part, but how they improve what they do so the team excels.
Yes, that is huge, and we don't show people how to do that. One of your obligations as a member of a team is to help make it easier for everybody else on your team to do what they do. That's part of why you're there. And
Yeah,
we get sucked into, no, each of the individuals separately is what we're looking at.
Yeah. One of my colleagues, a very simple thing he says is it takes a team. And I love that phrase because it's just so simple and it recognizes everybody. Recognize it takes a team that you get, some people might carry a main load or something, but there'll be other people that provide value in other ways, something unique or some noticing things, right, that can be fixed.
Yeah.
People don't work at the same pace. They work differently,
And that's okay.
And that's okay, right? You get the bulk of something done, and then you need some people that are, catch details and refine and circle back in places,
Russ Akoff used to tell a story. He said, if the National Basketball Association took all of its all-stars or the best 15 of its all-stars and created a separate team for them to play in the league the following year, he says that team would not win the championship. He said, partly because they hadn't learned to work together yet. But the year after that, they'd probably win the championship, but they wouldn't all be all-stars.
yeah.
We get trapped in the all-star part of it and not in the cooperation part of it. The cooperation, and it's in the sport I pay the most attention to. They have, for the last at least 15 years, they have decided that when the score is 3-2, the last guy that scored the goal, the third goal for his team, scored the game-winning goal. And my brain says, it's not a game-winning goal without the other two goals.
Right.
It's not, he didn't score. It's a team-winning goal.
Right. Yes, the announcer. So they also they put emphasis on the person who makes the goal.
We do that all the time.
A big deal. Yeah. All the time.
Basketball is my favorite because in the pro sport they score 120 points. So the game may be at the end, it may be 120 to 119. The first thing that strikes me is those two teams are pretty much equal. And the second thing that strikes me is they claim the last guy that shot the ball that got him to 120 points scored the winner. And I said, there are 118 other points. How is that the winner? The mentality, we're so interested in finding heroes. And my my biggest fear in wanting to find heroes is that if you believe in heroes, when you lose, you believe there are scapegoats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
There's the
that's
opposite.
horrible. These
Yeah.
guys in the World Cup 2 days ago, two teams lost on kicks from the penalty spot at the end of the game. Guys either missed shots or the goalie saved them. Those guys feel like garbage.
Yeah,
You don't need to go in and tell them how bad they were because they didn't score that goal. There's no reason to do that.
No, I got involved in kids soccer, much to my I hate the game personally, but my lad wanted to play and he was in some school team and they co-opted somebody to be the goalie and they're about 8-1 down in a match because this kid just didn't have any idea. You know, when the ball came towards him, he was the only person left between the advancing side and the goal, and he just couldn't. And this guy was a fantastic mover. He could throw himself on the floor quicker than I could. And they were all joshing him and pushing him about and saying, "You're bloody useless," and all this sort of stuff. And I had a little quiet word with the team at half time and said, "Do you want a goalie or not?" You know, when the ball gets to the goalie, you have let him down.
Yep.
You know, you've got to spread out a bit, not chase the ball and defend your goal as much as you're trying to get. And then I was talking to him, the goalie, through this, and sort of get him to hang back because don't go because you're the last man. You're the last man between them and the ball. Hang back. Wait until 20 or 30 feet ahead of you, and you can cover the ground quick. But stay there and defend the goal for that. And I don't think he let another one in the afternoon, and he became a goalie for one of the local posh teams, you know, like town team or something like that. Oh, I think he was taken on by Chelsea or in the kids.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I don't think it was me that helped him.
The guy that trained me to be a goalie, amateur soccer, trained me to be a goalie because I'm a big, tall American guy who can catch. He said, "Well, I will make a goalie out of him." Usually, I play defense, and he said, "Your job is to count the number of goals, so at the end of the game, you know if the referees made a mistake." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "Because if the ball's being shot at you, somebody in front of you made a mistake. It's not your fault." And I always remembered that. And I watched the way sportscasters and everybody else analyze this and said, "This goalie has kept 17 clean sheets." And I said, "It wasn't the goalie alone. He's one of the defenders." And I tease my defenders when I go to play goalie. And I say, when we're gathered together before the game starts, I say, "Before we break, I'll make a deal with you guys. You don't let them shoot, I won't let them score."
Yeah, good one.
Good agreement.
Yeah. How about the plan, do, study, act cycle?
Essential, I would have thought.
Yes,
Mhm.
especially in the management of people.
Yeah.
I did want to point out before we leave the team part of it, the ABC and ABCD, a lot of times, especially in business, those ABC, when there is a team, they're very rigid, right? Okay, only this role and this role and this role is going to come to this meeting and talk, no matter what the subject's about, right? So a lot of opportunity is missed there when ABC is part of there, but you're missing E and F, who have crucial information potentially. So that's just something I wanted to point out that struck me when I was reading that section.
Yes, I read that again somewhere in here. Curiously, I think just yesterday. It was about. It comes up again in a minute. Shortening the time for development to get all the people in at the beginning, so that you've got a complete picture of. This one is called developing a new engine, but that's on page 134. And in amongst there, it's points out that you want to get all the folks. So you've got somebody who can machine this stuff, and you've got somebody who understands purchasing metal or whatever it happens to be, all in the room together when you're cooking up your initial proposals. So that's a really good point, I think.
Interesting thing in this chapter too is he points out that, you know, when you're doing a development, the phases of development, that each of the phases needs to have the previous phase spend sufficient amount of resources so it can do its job. And generally, we organize things and look at the costs thinking you're going to start out sort of low and get higher and higher at the tag end. And if you're doing business that way, you're not spending your money ahead of time to make it easier for the next phase to do its job, in which case you're not going to end up with as good an output as if you start and make sure the early phases get enough resources in order to help the following phases.
Yeah.
Can I step back to that just in a second, as well as Sheldon's point? This it's on page 138, 139. He talks about each stage has got a leader. It's important to have a marketing man, but also the suppliers and the tool makers and the people who will be involved in the process need to be there in this expensive first stage, so that you really understand what you're doing. And I'd add to that, you've got the Toyota business of the engineering. They call them engineering notes or engineering. So that if you're building a new car, a new engine or a new door or something, they pull together all the previous attempts they've had at making doors or the improvements they put into them, so that you can use that information and not make the same mistakes that you made in the past. Lexus is a good one of the books. Toyota books on Lexus was good. Lexus could rely on all this background information that came out of Toyota, detailed information, and engineers would be experts in their field, door locks or doors or something.
Yeah, and that's vital, because if you do have those individuals, the team, with the knowledge of what's gone before, what I'd call they're a quality history review. You know what went well, you know what didn't go well. You need to get marketing, design, to engineering now, marketing, design engineers, manufacturing engineers, supply chain individuals engaged way up front, so that you focus on the important things which are good, which you can just incrementally improve still further, but you can drop the things that didn't work in the past. And there's a guy called Don Clausing, wrote a paper in about 2006 called Failure Mode Avoidance. So, and the backbone of it is FMEA's Failure Mode Effects Analysis, or as the Americans call it, failure modes and effects and criticality analysis, but it's the same technique. But you can use FMEAs where you focus on problem prevention way up front, not only in engineering, but you can do it in the service industries as well. But organizations don't. They just want to, and the typical, the British mentality is, let's get on, let's start making stuff, let's do it now, and we can fix it later. And of course, we all know that if you spend $1,000 now in the design stage and spend it well, you'll be okay. But if you leave it, it's $1,000, it's 10,000, it's 100,000, it's $1 million when it hits the customer, and then you're into rework and high warranty costs, etc., etc. So this PDCSA, but it's almost like PDSA now has been pushed to one side because you've got Global 8D, or you've got the Chrysler 7-step process, or you've got Kepner-Trago, or you can name them all. But it all comes back to this PDSA and Schuhart in the 30s.
Yeah.
So, you know, even Six Sigma, Deming is, it still
Yeah.
goes back. The root of all this is PDSA, but it's just been tarted up and made to look glitzy and glamorous. And it just becomes another fad. But we should go back to the basics, but we don't.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think
Excuse me.
I have one continuing. One of my colleagues was involved in the group I belong to. He calls PDSA SAPTO because he wants to start with study.
Yeah,
And I tend to say you come into this circle where you need to, where you are, and then look around you, look at the circle. You've got to study the system to find out what you're achieving at the moment, what you wanted to try and achieve, all that sort of stuff. So that's
Yeah, there's a lot of pre-work that frequently doesn't get done. I've discovered that in Brazil, they call the cycle Plan, Do, Check, Act, and it's applied mostly, almost exclusively, in program management. And the plan is establish a goal, and the doing is go out and do the work. And then the check is, did we meet the goal? And I'm looking at that saying, I mean, it's okay to do that, but that's not Plan, Do, Study, Act. That's just a project management type activity, and I'm not sure it's very effective at anything. It certainly it doesn't help you learn anything.
and if you start with study and analyze where we are today, then you can establish some baselines. You can work out, and and in the study part, there's one phrase I use: the purpose of analysis is insight. You're trying to get some insight on what we're doing today, what we've done in the past, and from there you can move forward. And you move forward by going to act. You can make a change, but you should be able to, if you go forward and the change doesn't work, you should be able to move back. But so many companies don't follow that. They just keep moving forward, you know.
Yeah.
sorry,
And
I'm about to cut you off, Tim. This calculation of K and 1 minus X and all that stuff. I really struggle with this. I like Martin's analogy of exponential cost at the end if you don't do it right at the beginning.
Well, I've got one simple slide which is based on academic research where I can't remember it, but it's a PowerPoint slide. I'm happy to send it to Tim to send around. And you start off, if you've got like your X and Y, and your X is time going across and Y is the cost, and then you start off with green because everything's good. And then it goes to yellow, then it goes to very bright red because things get worse and worse.
Yeah.
And I mean, as I mentioned, no, I better be careful. I keep forgetting that we're being recorded, and I tend to say what I feel, and I need to zip it sometimes. So, but let me just say, I know there is a company that gives. I'll make it neutral. They give a 3-year warranty in the UK, and they give a 5-year warranty for their product in the US, and they build in for the extra warranty, they put in extra costs so they can cover the warranty costs in years 4 and 5. Yeah, I'm not going to say who they are.
What do you mean
I
by
might tell you
extra
Sorry?
costs? What did you mean by when you said they put in extra costs to cover the years 4 and 5?
Yeah, well, they set aside money for the extra warranty costs they're going to incur in years
they
4
plan
and
for it.
5.
Right.
Yeah, they set
Yeah.
aside. So 3-year warranty in the UK
Yeah.
for, let's say, the widget here. But this widget in the US is built exactly the same way. But in the US, it's a 5-year warranty. But they know they're going to be hammered with paying out for unhappy customers. So they try and placate the customers by building in a 5-year warranty, but the company has to pay for it. So it's a loss. It's Taguchi's loss to society.
Yeah.
But, so why don't they give us a 5-year warranty in the UK? Because they can't afford to do it.
But they want that business. They still want the American
They
business.
want the American business. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they get volume on it or something, or other value.
If you buy me a beer one night when I'm visiting the US, I might tell you, but otherwise my lips are sealed.
It's partly.
It sounds a bit like the Ford gearbox and the made by Suzuki or something, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
They wondered why somebody at last did an analysis after some long time that the gearboxes were quite a large failure rate, and then they realised that the difference was some were homegrown and some were made in Japan.
Yeah.
Oh, we have that here. Mercedes. Some Mercedes are made. Some of the SUV Mercedes are made in Mexico, and people have more problems with them. Versus we have ones that come from Germany. I think because we're right on the west coast here, so they ship them to the coast. Yeah, they're supposed to be much better. Yeah, reliable, much more reliable.
There is a big manufacturer that you'd have thought had learned that lesson.
Well, yeah. It takes some time to learn those things, and the question is, are you going to get knocked out of business before you learn them? And I know Ford and GM learned a lot from having Deming and people who understood Deming help them. They still, I don't think, have transformed as much as they need to. But I remember seeing things where Bill Bellows tells a story about being at a track. I think it was a General Motors test track. And the cars are going around. This is like early 70s, late 60s. And there's a car sort of beside the track that's under a tarp, and it's shorter than the cars running around the track. And the guy asked whoever was giving him the tour, he said, what's under the tarp there? And he says, oh, that's a competitor's car. It was a Japanese car of some sort, a Toyota. And they pull the cover off, and he says, well, why do you have that? And he says, well, we test our competitors' cars. He says, well, how's that one doing? He says, damnedest thing. We've been running it and running it and running it. We can't wear it out.
So we're leaving it outside.
And I know Ford did an experiment where they took apart a couple of Ford engines and measured every dimension on it. And then they took apart some Toyota engines and measured those dimensions. And their conclusion was the Ford parts individually were better than the Toyota parts, but the Toyota engine performed better. Because the US wasn't worried about the interactions and how the parts work together. They were worried about how they were looked at separately. It's amazing.
Well, that's the same story as the Merlin engine in the Spitfires and the like, and getting them made in America by Packard. Packard had to strip them down on the drawing and redo them with some decent tolerances on it. So the message is already available in Packard. Make the pistons the same size as slightly smaller than the bores.
There's a comment in this chapter that the first time I read it took me a while to figure it out, and I didn't figure it out on my own, where Deming shows the time card with 2 signatures on it, and they were having trouble with it. And then Deming says, and the reader will easily see the problem. I kept looking at it and said, I don't see the damn problem. So then he explains it. You got 2 guys signing, and each one thinks the other one's going to make sure there are no mistakes. So they do a half-assed job. And he said, if somebody's can be held responsible for something, you should hold them responsible. And it only needs to be 1, not 2. He distinguishes between joint responsibility and divided responsibility, and reminds us that when you're trying to teach somebody, there's a joint responsibility for the learning.
But that's like people that example. There's no trust in what's being recorded. So if you to pick up on Deming's point, drive out fear. So if you embed trust, you will drive out fear, and you let people do the job, and just you train them, and like you say, well, this is what we've got. Let them challenge the system. Don't accept the status quo. If somebody thinks, oh, actually, there's a better way we could do this, well, let's run a pilot, let's go with it, and let's do it. But you're trusting them to do things. And I think it was at Deming Forum conference years ago. One of the speakers, Hazel Cannon, organized it. I used to help her with the conferences, and somebody said international travel had to be signed off by the chief executive officer for business travel, and he was complaining because costs were going up really fast and didn't like it. And of course, the reason why it was getting worse and worse because he wasn't always there to sign off the travel, and so flights were missed. So then they had to rebook it and da da da. And they looked at the system and said, "Well, actually, just delegate down to a team manager. They've got the budget, let them do it, and then the cost came down drastically and everything improved. But he decided that he had to sign off all international travel. A complete waste of his time. I think it was the Deming.
Especially since the executive job is to work on the future.
Yeah.
Oh,
Plenty
yeah.
of time to sign stuff. Yeah. We had a corollary to that. HR decided that they would collect all these permissions to travel by plane, and you had to do the booking through the HR department, and they would do it through a local travel agent, and it was always BA. And we were using EasyJet and God knows what else for half the blooming money. So the price of doing these flights was sort of doubled instantaneously for the first month. And I had to have a quiet word with them and say, my team's going to carry on using EasyJet because we can't afford your scheme. And funnily enough,
You just wanted to rub it in their face that you knew more than they did.
No, I didn't. Oh, yeah.
So we're tied with management of people. We had the experiment with the red beads, chapter 7.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a lot to do with the management of people. In fact, Deming points out that the reason to pay attention to the experiment in the red beads is it's an example of how not to manage a company. It's a terrible way of managing things. And also there he has 14 points. He says, here are the lessons that you might learn from this.
Yeah.
And I always found it interesting in talking to people who were first introduced to the red beads. They were more enamored of plotting data and looking at the variation, whether it was common cause or special cause. And when Deming writes up what he learned from this, he's not really pushing on the fact, he said the system is stable, but he's pushing on all these other things, on all the things that affect the people and how they're going to act subsequently. It's not about control charts. It's about managing people and making them feel like they're contributing and showing them how they contribute to whatever goes on. And whether their average is 9 red beads or 12 red beads, it has little to do with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that gone?
good after you.
Has anybody, any of you guys actually run the red beads experiment yourselves, or actually been one of the team inside the red beads?
I've run it a few times, not a lot, maybe 3 or 4 times. It's
Yeah,
always
I've
it's always interesting. The most difficult part is helping people understand red beads aren't quote defects. Deming's not big on defects. It's not defective. It's just red instead of white. And so it's not about eliminating defects and going to 0 defects. It's nothing to do with that. It has to do with managing the people and helping them move into that mentality. Is because one of the questions I've seen asked with the red beads is, what's a red bead? And ask people to define what one is. And that's the wrong tack. This isn't about the red beads and the white beads. It's about managing the people. So the questions ought to be about what's a better way to manage these people? What's a better way to help them improve the process so they don't get as many red beads, etc. And so when you ask the wrong questions, people end up focusing on the wrong things. And Deming uses this, but he doesn't push this. He mentions it's a stable process and shows you why it's how he knows it's stable, but he doesn't push that end of it. It's not about control charts. It's about managing people.
Yeah, although it does say on point 11 on page 170, and I'm using second edition, so I don't think it's changed. It would have been good had management worked with the supplier of beads to try to reduce the proportion of red beads in the incoming material.
Exactly.
And yet, when I've run the red beads experiment, nobody picks up on that. So, and it's crazy. The first time I did the red beads, Henry Neve, who I knew, he's not very well at the moment. He's got memory loss. He ran it, and I was one of the inspectors, you know, because as a statistician, apparently I can count, so you know that's good. But then, I mean, these points, these 14 points, are really the things that hit home. But you want people to pick up on that when you run it. But many of them don't. You've really got to, you know, some of them just miss the whole experiment altogether. Oh, it's just a waste of my time. You know, you're not, because they're not thinking about the bigger picture. They can't translate this red beads experiment to what they do inside their own organizations. So again, that's the role of a good coach, mentor, manager, to help them understand that there are parallels. I think the red beads is still very, very valuable. It really does bring lots of lessons home.
One of the things I found it valuable for is when I want to introduce somebody to Deming who's unfamiliar, if I show them, I don't have to show them the whole, usually it's a 90-minute video when he does the experimentation, but you can show about 20 minutes of it and they get the idea, they see what's going on. And that's a way to get them in a position where they might want to ask for, well, what else can you tell me and what else might I learn? Yeah. So it's a kind of a flashpoint that might help them decide they're going to invite you in. It might not, and that's okay too, but it's better than handing them out of the crisis and say, read a couple of chapters of this and then we can get back and talk. That's not going to grab a lot of people, but the red beads can grab some people.
I really like the point. Go ahead.
Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really like the point too that he made where he was talking about interviewing one of the employees and how they really wanted, even though they understood that they couldn't affect the outcome, they really wanted to do better. You know, that hit home with me. That's very important.
I think people identify with these roles, and because you're watching this play that's going on in front of you, you buy into the roles, and it's very difficult to step back and say, well, why is it all bloody going wrong? And especially one of the questions you almost can't ask is, let's do away with the red beads, because suddenly you become aware that the thing doesn't work unless you've got red beads.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing too, having to do with running the experiment and getting people to recognize what it might mean overall instead of just red beads, and that's for me is the most difficult part. You get their attention, but as you say, helping them understand how could we make things better. Well, let's get to a supplier that might not send us anything with red beads. Let's figure out maybe we can find a customer who likes red beads, and we can separate them and sell him the red beads, that sort of stuff. Get them stimulated on thinking, what does this exercise tell you about how you might make improvements? Because the way Deming's trying to make improvements is by rewarding and punishing the individual workers who have no control over the outcome.
That's right. Yeah.
The other thing that's really good is if you give people data that you collected and do studies with it, they're much more skeptical than if they are creating the data right there in front of them. This is their data, nobody else's data. You did this, and then discuss their data. They're much more engaged.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. He pointed that out, that in his in doing this experiment, he would have the audience collect the data and chart the data on their own. Each person would do their own collection and charting. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's an element with the red beads is that problem that you have when you're giving presentations and ask questions of your audience to get them involved and start thinking about certain points. And those I found those questions have really got to be accurate and targeted, because you can often get an answer that you, off the wall, you weren't expecting, because somebody didn't understand some of your presentation and they don't see the connection with the question you just asked. So.
So maybe we're 5 minutes left and we're ready to move on. And next time we're going to take a look at Chapter 8 on control charts and Chapter 9 on the funnel experiment. I don't remember where Deming got the funnel experiment, but it's really a clever way of showing how messing with a stable system, tampering, only makes the variation worse. You can't make it better. If you have a system and you don't like the way it's performing, and it's performing in a stable manner, the only thing you can do is change something in the system. Little tweaks here and there aren't going to make any difference. They're going to make things worse. That's not an intuitive thing for most people. So if something doesn't go the way I want, I got to tweak it right now.
Yeah.
And so every time you do something, you tweak it. So you never do it the same way twice. So the variation just gets worse and worse.
Yeah, you move the normal distribution over a bit.
Yeah.
Just before we leave the red beads, it's still, I think it's interesting that on page 164, you look at the average number of beads on the 4 paddles he used over the years. And it's not statistical sampling, it's mechanical sampling, as he points out.
Yeah.
And it's the environment, it's different people, it's different operators. There's so much variation coming in from outside that it does affect the X bars per paddle over the years, over all the experiments.
Yeah.
But if you spoke to somebody, they'd think, well, they've all got to be the same, because it's, but then they're not. That's the whole point of why we're doing this exercise, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a
everything's
shock
different.
reading that. I remember when I first read that, and we've been talking about it in another group, and that really did surprise me. You'd have thought they'd move towards the 20% of the beads. And they
Yeah,
don't.
it's the bias of mechanical sampling is there, but you don't know how big it is
Yeah,
unless you
yeah.
can
Well,
figure out how to measure it. And
it can also be the size of the beads or the
Mhm.
weight of the
yes,
beads.
yes,
Yeah.
the friction, how much
Yeah,
wax is on them, etc.
yeah.
The intriguing thing is I discovered this, so it was late 60s when in the US I was in college and they decided college students weren't going to get exempted from getting drafted and dragged over to the war in Vietnam. And so I was a little nervous about that. And the way they were going to decide on who to start drafting is they were going to choose birthdays. They put all 365 days, 366 days in a barrel, mix it up, pull out birthdays, and based on your birthday, that's the first birthday pulled out. We're going to draft people from that, and the second birthday we're going to work our way up, and then we're going to go probably to 150 birthdays most of the time. And they didn't understand mechanical sampling, and they didn't understand mixing theory. So they put in the January birthdays and mixed them up. Then they put in February's and mixed them up. Then they put in March and mixed them up, and so on. So the ones that got mixed up the most were certainly the ones that were put in first. The ones that got mixed up the least were the ones that were put in last. So when they pulled stuff out, there were way more birthdays at the tied to the September to December dates than there were from the January to March dates. And oh, by the way, my birthday's the 22nd of November, and I was number 7.
Oh,
Ah,
mm,
very
Luckily,
good.
I managed to avoid that, but they clearly didn't understand mechanical sampling or mixing theory.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you for all joining.
Yep.
I'm
Thank you
gonna.
for having us.
I think I forgot. I didn't manage to post the last 2 recordings. I'll try to get all 3 of them posted over the weekend. Host tools, record. Where's my record button again? More. Record, pause recording, stop recording. Here we go. We're stopping the recording.
Okay. I'll